Hi and welcome to another episode of Top Volts, and today we're going to be looking at this Jaguar Lister. It's the MM-E1, so it's the Jaguar Lister with the lights. So this was first released in 1962 on their 3rd edition catalogue. This car appears to be in pretty sound condition. You've got the usual kind of warping of the body and the chassis, which tends to happen to these sort of Jaguars and also the Aston Martins as well. I think technically it's something to do with the mould process. Some just came out slightly warped, some didn't. Sunlight can do it as well, you know, various heat. This is suffering with the black spots in the body shell, which, you know, is normal for this sort of thing. I've been told a lot of time it's from the rubber that they've used as discoloured and reacted with the plastic, the same as like the rubber on the tyres. So when these tyres are spooling up, you can see sort of the dark there, and also in these two places where you've got the lights touching the body, and then also the tyres on here touching the body. So it's a reaction of rubber and plastic. Not a great deal you can do with this, other than with the white cars with the black spots. You can bleach them out, but you do tend to lose other details in that process, like the stickers. Sometimes if the bodies had the built-in or molded in transfers, they can fade. So sometimes it's best just to leave it alone, really. I think it kind of adds character, really, to the car, and kind of like sort of war wounds, you could say. This one is in need of some new brushes. The guide itself, this circular guide, that's in good condition. Like I said, this is the one with the lights, so we'll have a little look inside, see what's going on. There seems to be something just slightly catching on these gears. It might be the rear pinion or the rear gear. I mean, it still turns, but I can feel a slight snagging in places. If I turn it slowly, like there's a snag. So we can open it up and have a little look and see what's happening there, whether it needs a new pinion or a new rear gear. So these are held together by two retaining clips, front and back, which is the same on the MMC56 Jaguar Lister. Basically the same car, but they've modified it to have the lights. So on the previous video I showed the comparison between the two, and you can actually see where they've drilled these out to put the lights in. So we'll open this up. So just pull these two retaining clips. They don't come all the way out, so you just want to stop until you feel resistance. These can sometimes bite because they can be quite tight. Just ease that off. Best to take your time with this, just because you don't want to break or any of these retaining pins, which pinch into these areas there. So as you can see, you've got the rear bulb at the end and the two up the front, and these relate to the stains underneath. If I can show you, see where you got the retaining rubbers for the lights. So we're running the RX motor, the original rear pinion and original rear gear. So all the bulbs are still intact, which is really nice to see. These are held in by these rubbers towards the back here, and the way these bulbs are held in is that the bulbs themselves have these wires. If I take this rubber off and we pull these pins out, which have the power supply to the bulb, and then we can then ease out the bulb, try not to break the very fragile wires. And we push that through. So you just got to thread all that through. Okay, one of the wires is broken off, so we'll have to replace this bulb, which is not a problem. We can buy those. So these bulbs come with, if you can see, the wires attached. So there's 2 wires, and what you do with those, you pass the wires through the center and you get the bulb to sit nicely into that rubber. You then bend the wire through the little holes to the left and to the right of the bulb, and you feed that through all the way until the wire comes out the other side. So you've got it just like this, and then the power, lift that up, the pin will literally push back into that rubber, making contact with that wire, and that's how it's held in. So I've got to get a replacement bulb for this one where the wire's snapped, which is very, very normal for these. Those wires are literally so brittle. Some people solder the wire to the guide, but you don't really have to do that because the rubber does the work for you. So I'll just clip those back in. Okay, so we'll move on to the motor, the rear pinion and the rear gear. So I mentioned earlier that I could feel a notching, and having a closer look, you can see this is all original gear, pinion, and the teeth all look to be in good condition. I've had a good look around. There's not any missing teeth or any bent teeth, but what I have noticed on the inside of the rear gear there's a notch just in the brass. So it looks like possibly at some point somebody's working on this and they've knocked the brass, and that brass is just touching the pinion as it comes around. So it was given the impression, you can see that just there, that there was a problem. And actually, in fact, there's just a ridge just touching the pinion as it goes around, and forcing the rear gear away from the pinion. So we'll take this off and just literally take a tiny bit of brass away from that with a file, and then hopefully that should solve the problem. But we'll also give this motor a drink of oil and just check the pickups. It all looks to be quite clean, so that doesn't need to be cleaned in there actually. And those brushes, they look like they're in very good condition. All the soldered joints look to be in good condition. We can push that back onto that brush a bit more. As I've mentioned before with these RX motors, if I lift that around, so on the side you've got your spring, and one of the spring sides is sheathed, which has the power supply to that brush. The opposite brush is powered through the body of the motor itself. So the sheath is there to stop the arcing of power. So I'll just remove this rear drive shaft and gear, and then we'll give that a little file. Okay, so with that rear axle removed, we can have a closer inspection. So if I keep turning that, so there we can see the ridge just there. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to lightly file that down. It really doesn't need a lot at all, because the brass itself is actually quite soft, which is probably how this has ended up getting damaged. And it could be damaged so easily purely by maybe trying to set up the rear gear to run nicer with the pinion, and somebody's gone in there with a screwdriver to try and ease that. It's literally as easy as that. You've then dented it, because the rear gear and the rear bearings on this, they literally run right up against each other like that. So there's literally no tolerance in there for movement. So if you're trying to adjust it, then it's very difficult to do that, other than possibly taking a file to each tooth of this rear gear to make it mesh nice, which, you know, sometimes it's good practice just to go through and just clear it to make sure there's no dirt or debris in between these teeth as well. And also it gives you the opportunity to check each one. I do often try my best to retain these rear gears because I do like the original gear. And if you can, it's just a nice little touch really for the car, sort of true to its heritage really. Obviously it'd be much easier just to replace it with a plastic rear gear, but even nicer if you can keep the original. Okay, so I've taken a tiny amount off there, which hopefully should be enough. So you can see I've rounded that off, so you can see that I didn't actually take a lot at all. So we'll put this back into the car. So just lift those out the way. We'll get the two bearings over, and then what we want to do is just bring that motor up. And as previously mentioned in other videos, give the chassis some support from behind and just give it a nice gentle push. That side as well. There you go, perfect. And then we'll just lower that motor back into place, rolling backwards as you do. We'll just place those pickups back in there, those pins for the light. Which can be sometimes a little fiddly. Come on. There you go. Perfect. Okay, let's see how this is. Right, okay, that's perfect. So that's running really well. So we'll just put some oil in this motor. Which, as mentioned before, you just want to put it down on the center spine of the motor, just there, just so it goes into this pad. And then the same, just up by the pinion, just around the neck of the pinion, that's where you want to put that. And then there's another pad just there that is good just to get some oil soaked into that. And we just turn that up and turn that motor in. And I think I might even put a little bit on this axle. Okay, that's perfect. So we'll pop the body shell back on and then run this up. I think for now I'll leave those braids and I'll extend them a little bit later. So we'll pop this body shell back on. Just being careful not to pinch any cables, wires. And just remember to pull the pins out either side before we push that down. Perfect. And we've just popped those back in. That's brilliant. Okay, so we'll give this a run up. You'll notice that with the original gearing and pinion, these are quite noisy in comparison to a modern car. But that's all part of the character really. So we'll give this a little run up and just make sure it's operating as it should. Okay, so we'll give this a little run up. We'll start the volts low and just slowly increase. We'll leave it running with say sort of top volts running for it for a little while, and just allow those gears to make sure they are meshing nice, and just to see if there's any extra work that we need to do. So I'll start the volts low, and then we'll slowly increase. Okay. And I'll slowly bring those up. As you can see, the lights at the front are working. Obviously the one at the back isn't. And that's drawing the right amount of volts, which is good. So I'm going to slowly bring that back. Okay, so as you could hear, that was a very loud Scalextric car. Obviously, you can make that much quieter by changing the rear gear to a more modern gear. But like I said, I like keeping it true to what it was. Well, thank you for watching my video. I hope you've enjoyed the content and found the tips of some use. As always, if you have any advice or tips on this car, or actually any vintage car, please do leave it down in the comment section. I'll try my very best to get back to you. But thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.